You're listening to the Beyond Sundays podcast. Each week we talk to people just like you who share stories of God's faithfulness. Remember last time I shared that this conversation involved a field trip, safety glasses, and a safety briefing? Well, I'm not going to spoil it all quite yet, but today I sat down with Erik, Jensen, and Scott Wallermann, two men from our church, as they shared what God is doing in their workplace. If you work in a secular environment, I know this will encourage you. Y'all, we sat down for over an hour, and honestly, the time just flew by. It was that good. But don't worry, we're going to break up the conversation into 2 weeks because I just couldn't trim anything down. So definitely come back next week for the second half of this conversation that will wrap up our 4-part series on work and faith. Believe me, you won't want to miss either one of these episodes. As for today, what kind of a difference can your faith make at the place you work? How can we influence a dark work culture when where we work is not technically faith-based? How do you take spiritual authority over the place you work? Better yet, what does that even look like? And what happens when the way you lead others, the way you interact with those you work with, is driven by empathy, compassion, and an eagerness to serve people so that they not only succeed, but also grow? Why don't I let Scott and Erik share with us what God has been up to in their workplace the last few years. So let's get to it. Well, hey everyone, I'm so excited to have two new friends in the studio with me today. I have Erik Jensen and Scott Wallermann, and they have become new friends as in like recently because of the work that they do and the work that they do out at Broadwind, which is a plant northwest of Abilene, Texas. Yeah. Something that we've probably all passed at some point on our way to West Texas. But I wanted to have them in today because of a conversation that actually began between Erik and I after our first healing prayer online.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And you got me hooked on what you guys are doing and what you're seeing out at the plant and the things that God is up to out there. And so I couldn't wait you invited me out to come see the plant and have a tour, and I just was in awe of the whole thing. But more than being in awe of what the plant actually does and what y'all do out there with the welding and the craftsmanship and just over 200 employees and all of those things, I was overwhelmed by hearing the testimonies of what God is doing through, people at work, right? And there is this intersection between work and faith. There is no great divide between work that is secular and work that is sacred. All work is dignified. All work can glorify God. All work is good as long as it, doesn't bring harm to other people.
Right.
But before we dive into this conversation, why don't y'all introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you, Erik? Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, my name is Erik Jensen. I am privileged to be the general manager for the Broadwind facility that we're referencing. I lead just over 200 wonderfully flawed people. It's been a role that I've had for 2 years now. Actually not a stranger to the business. I've actually worked for the business for 9 years. It is a public company, traded on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, that type of thing. And I used to hold a role in the corporate environment as the Executive Vice President, Chief Human Resources Officer for the company. Had a little break in service, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but decided to make the transition to Abilene to lead this wonderful plant.
And you've been in Abilene now for how many years?
I've been officially in this role 2 years, but I actually did some consulting work for about 6 months prior to that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you've been around Beltway about that long, correct?
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah, actually, the church was actually pre-selected for me by Scott.
Hey! All right, Scott, it's your turn. Tell us a little bit about you.
All right. Well, I'm Scott Wallermann. I've been working for Broadwind for about 15 years. I actually started my career in Manitowoc, Wisconsin at our plant there as a door welder. Kind of moved through different positions, ended up getting some certifications and stepping into a CWI role where they were needing some help down here. So 2013, 2014, I started traveling down here to the plant, helping them out. late 2014, they asked me to relocate to Abilene, Texas. Probably one of the last places I ever wanted to move to, but Broadwin was pretty persuasive, and actually Erik played a big role at that point. He was kind of the recruiting me to come down here, so he persuaded me to come on down, and came down, and we started getting the plant lined out, and I came down as a supervisor, and I've been doing that mostly up until about 2020, where I stepped out of that role and back into a welding engineer role. So, and that's currently the position that I hold right now. So.
And your wife works here at Beltway,
She
Samantha.
does. Yep. She's the MOPS coordinator. So.
Yep. She's works on our floor. So I get to see her often. Love that lady. Well, I'm so thankful that y'all are willing to have this conversation. Before we dive into work and faith, I know that a lot of listeners may not know exactly what it is that y'all are doing out at Broadwin. What are you making? Can you explain?
Yeah. So it's a heavy fabrications factory. So you're looking at some very large steel weldments, cutting, forming, welding, then coating and assembling. And we've got primarily two product lines there. One is wind towers. So we make the sticks that you see that hold up the big fan blades out in the field. We just make the sticks. The stick that we're making right now is 385 foot tall when all four sections are put together. Mm-hmm. And we make the sticks. And then also we have kind of this new product line that actually is a first Broadwin product, and it's called PRS, which is a pressure reduction system that goes into the oil and gas field for virtual gas, natural gas pipeline stuff. So two product lines, a lot of people focused in. We operate actually round the clock for the most part, Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays and Sundays during daylight hours. So we stay pretty busy.
Yes, you do. And when I went out there to see just what it is that, like how the plant's set up and what y'all do and just the process of building the sticks, and even the new piece too, the seat, what is it called again?
PRS.
PRS. Yeah. I was amazed at just the level of excellence, the craftsmanship. I mean, there were people welding as I was walking by, and I saw the sparks, and I was like, man, this is amazing. I love the work that you're doing. The culture, however, is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Because you guys have noticed, you've been a part of God changing the culture in the plant over the last couple of years. And I'd love for y'all to tell that story. Would you mind going back and telling how it all started when you started seeing, all right, here's this culture of brokenness and darkness, but it's not that way necessarily anymore. So what has changed?
Yeah, maybe Scott, you could start with like Scott said, I was in a role where I was leading HR for the company and obviously looking at development, succession, and growing people. And Scott, obviously very capable, very bright, someone we saw and continue to see a lot of potential in, and, relocated him here. But he walked into a very different plant at that time, and it's just kind of evolved, right?
Oh, yeah. The plant, when I came in, it was extremely lost. They had forgotten what craftsmanship was. They were all about taking shortcuts, and then ended up kind of tripping over themselves routinely, making more mistakes doing their work. And it kind of resembled my life on the outside, because, or on the inside. I was pretty well put together, and I was a convincing speaker, and I was professional, but on the inside I was broken and lost. And that's kind of how I entered the plant along with it. And it was kind of this transition as I came in. I remember being on a business trip down here working with a guy, and we were going to lunch, and he asked me if I'd ever moved down here. I said, they couldn't pay me $1 million to move to Abilene, Texas. I said, and that was literally what I said. Yeah. And I can guarantee you I don't make $1 million right now. Mm-hmm. But, getting into it, what ended up drawing me in was, they presented this opportunity to come down and supervise, and I had put so much work, and it was making a difference. And I liked that, even though I wasn't a Christian, I wasn't saved at that time, but I liked being able to help people do their job, and it was just felt like the right thing to do, Yeah. But the people in the plant, it was just a bunch of people, but they was just a little bit different than they are up north where I was growing up. They're more polite, they're kind, they listen, they're friendly. It was the first time that there was a guy in the shop, and I was just walking by on a mission to go handle something, and he said, "Hey, can I pray for you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so," and he did, and it really didn't mean anything. It didn't really go anywhere, but it was like one of the first things that I remember of something's different, in Abilene here in this plant. And, long story short, I ended up coming down here. We started getting things sorted out. The team really started kind of meshing, and we started working through things. And it definitely wasn't easy. It was definitely not me alone. It was a team effort, everyone working together. And, it really just kind of started working out. But then, shortly after that, we kind of got things fixed a little bit, and I had gone to C shift, and I was really coming into the shop. I was really coming down here because I fed my ego. My identity was filled by being in the limelight, fixing things. I wanted to attaboy. I never really got that. My dad was out of the picture when I was young, and every boss that I ever had, I kind of always looked at as trying to get a pat on the back, and it always left me like empty, and it was fleeting, and it never went anywhere. But so I came down. It was a huge ego trip for me. Got put on the weekend shift, and I had no influence, no limelight. There was nothing. I was sitting at home and with my kids that I wasn't a fit parent at the time. I was always kind of put work before my wife and before my kids. Priorities were out of check. And, I was just sitting in my mess alone. And through some people just reaching out, they kind of opened my eyes to Jesus, and, just started clicking, and God was calling my name, and he called me, out of where I was at. And, that's really where I seen something different. I just caught fire quick, and I couldn't stop from bleeding out into everywhere I went. So
your faith, it was like you couldn't hide it.
And it wasn't even, it's not even being intentional and trying. It just was there, and it just comes out. And I'm like,
this
it's
is who
just
I am.
part of me now.
Yeah.
It's the new Scott. The old guy is dead. Here's the new guy. So.
And it's my understanding that those were neighbors. Is that correct?
It is correct. Yeah, they were. And it was actually the neighbors that were there before them were just really kind and generous. And they moved to Arnold Air Force Base, and they left a tractor for us to use for 3 years without any checks or checking on it or anything. And he just asked, just cut their grass. And I said, I'll go cut their grass. And I did. And it prompted them to come over and say thank you. And it spurred a whole awesome relationship, and probably some of the most solid friends that we've had since we've had.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you mentioned, you caught fire quick. Where did that fire go? It had to affect your work, right? And I remember last time I talked with you guys when I was out at Broadwin, there was something that you started kind of doing out at Broadwin after you accepted Jesus in your life.
And yeah, there was a couple times where, I'd talk to people, but then I started shortly after that, I had gotten on night shift, and it was just kind of another kind of bleak, dark kind of time. And it was kind of not a lot of people around. So I had started a little Bible study with some guys after work, and it worked out. But it was, I'd always try to be the light in the dark, and try to be. It was always like, every opportunity I had to try and lead someone to Jesus or show them, the light that's what I took. And it just happened. But, it was always met at that time with almost affliction or beware of what you're doing. You're going to get in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so be it. Like, fire me then. Like, I'm not trying to be like, you can't replace me, but it's like, if I'm going to get fired for my faith, I'd rather have a different job. God will provide. I'm not worried about that. It'll all work out in the long run. So, I kind of just continued, and, and then some of them, the people they started kind of catching on a little bit, but it was always kind of, maybe some shadow games and trying to play along with it a little bit. But just continuing to just walk and be the light and be there for people. And it was just being sincere and intentional, and, talking to people whenever opportunities came up, and just treating people the way you want to be treated. That's the golden rule that, Jesus put before us. Like, that's the law and the prophets. If we can do that, I mean, that settles a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And that's what I felt when I went out there to Broadwind, was that you guys, your whole plant, your whole 200 people, it's about the people, right? It's about people ultimately.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if we've mentioned this, but the company is not a faith-based company.
No.
But it's also not saying you can't exercise parts of your faith and who you are. And so let's go a little deeper here.
Yeah.
Erik, why don't you dive in?
Yeah. So, I had the privilege of actually seeing Scott go through the cycle, right? Just as the plant, lost, confused, getting to a place of on fire for the Lord, and certainly reaping some of the fruits of that along the way. And in many regards, he was a man alone in that endeavor. I remember coming down when I was in my previous job. I'd come down and visit with Scott, touch base with you, and you'd talk about your faith and the walk and that type of stuff. And I was in a job where very high up, I was number 3 in this company that I'm working at today, officer in the company, working with the board. Had always had these roles working with people through like HR, and I identified with the human resources area because of kind of my real strong sense of servanthood and just wanting to serve people, and just didn't have the connections that I was truly desiring. And ultimately, I ended up leaving that role. No job, very highly compensated job, left the job, no job. I love my wife. She stuck with me through that, very much so, man. But at any rate, it was kind of interesting because when I left, that was right at the time COVID hit, and I couldn't find a job. And I just prayed, Father, whatever you do, don't distract me with nonsense in my job search. You know my heart. You know my desire. I want to serve. I want to serve you, and I want to serve people and help them grow. And I don't know what that looks like. I have this resume that's very much anti-church, quite frankly. It's all about profits, all about growing businesses, and some maybe not so proud things in that endeavor, right? And I just wanted to do something different, and I was invited down to just consult, in a quality role. And, it was guys like Scott and others there at the plant that I started to re-engage with, and I started to feel this calling. And the seeds that were there, I saw something there, but there was a lot of darkness. I mean, the plant, it wasn't making money. This plant has not made money for a lot of years, generates a lot of cash, okay? But it doesn't make money. There's a lot of question marks about it. But I just saw this group of extremely talented people, and Sarah, you saw what we build. I mean, it's
impressive.
It's phenomenal what these men and women do in the plant. And this idea, I was approached with the idea 3 times. I said no 2 times to lead the plant, and then finally the Lord just gave me the nudge and said, you know what, you need to go to Abilene. So came down to Abilene, and was a very prayerful journey. Scott knows this. There was a lot of deliberation, and obviously the church choice was important. So Scott immediately latched onto me and had me come to Beltway, and fell in love with the church right away and the church leadership, and a good partnership there. But we just started ever so slowly trickling in faith. And I remember the first big step I took, of doing something different that maybe no one has ever seen before in that plant. A plant that isn't performing, not doing well, quality is horrible. Question marks on whether the plant's even going to survive. And I remember I brought a different energy, obviously lifted up, carried the same energy Scott and others bring into it. And I remember at the very first all-hands meeting, I started with, God is good. And I paused, and no one said anything. And they all looked around, and they were, okay, this is different. And that's what started it. Truthfully, that's what started. I say God is good at all hands meetings now. I have all the time, right on. I get shout
You get
outs.
responses,
I
yeah.
get responses, right?
Yeah.
But so that's where it started, really. We just pressed into that. And culturally, it starts with a basis of as a leader, I'm here to help you be successful.
Yeah.
It's leading from a place of influence rather from a position. It's being willing to go that extra mile to lend an ear or help out or whatever the case might be. Because like I said, we are a plant of 200 wonderfully flawed people, and we all have issues. We all bring things to the plant. We all have past, but now, the exciting thing is what we're building momentum on is getting more and more folks aligned with their walk in faith, aligned with Christ in that endeavor. Yeah.
And one thing I was going to say is, neither as we walk around as like ambassadors of Christ, but by no means are we perfect.
No.
There's been opportunities when I've made a complete fool of myself and said things that I regret and were called out on by non-believers around me. And I was like, wow, he's right. I'm proclaiming to be a Jesus follower, and he called me out on it. I said a joke that was just, kind of just untasteful for what he knew I stood for.
Right.
And he called me out on it. And I said, you know what, you're right. And those things were part of the sanctification of like learning how to walk and how to talk was, and those things are letting him see, and I'm not right. I'm not perfect. I'm broken. But taking those opportunities even in that and apologizing openly to a group of grown men that, hey, I'm sorry for bringing that up. I shouldn't have said that.
It's good.
Those are the spots that are like, this is different.
Yeah.
That's weird. You don't normally hear that because it's, coming into a lot of shops similar to this, and even to this shop a long time ago, it's a lot of pride. I'm proud. I got it all put together. I'm tough. I'm a welder. But when you start walking in truth, it's okay to be not okay. And to kind of wear that but then I'm surrounded by people that care about me, and we kind of pick each other up and work through those things. And I even remember like going to business lunches with other companies that support our business. And I'd, so nervously say, hey, can I pray for the meal real quick?
Yeah.
And, they're like, yeah, I guess. And now it's like we go to lunch with coworkers and other people, and they put their hats down and they look at me like,
you're going to pray, right?
You're going to pray, right? We're waiting for you. I mean, it's so...
Yeah. There's the pause now, right? They just sit and they look at you waiting. Okay. And there's a, I mentioned, we do have some very good Scots, one of them obviously spiritual lieutenants in the plant.
Yes.
And, it's continuing to prayerfully walk into that as we bring people on board. Those folks that will add to the necessary feeding, the light. People pretty much figure out who they are pretty quick and look to those individuals,
Yeah. Something I love about the plant and just the culture there is, and you've mentioned it in several conversations that I've had with you guys when I was there visiting, but also in other conversations I've had with y'all, is that it is truly a place for brokenness, like for us all, right? And you lead out in that in your leadership. And you lead out in that in a place of humility, just like the story you just shared, Scott. And that's so Jesus. It's Jesus all over. I mean, he was a humble leader. He put others before himself. He came to serve, not be served. He laid his life down for others. And that's what I've heard you guys share, is that this plant is a place where men and women can come, bring their brokenness, bring their pain, bring their trauma, bring anything. And it's a place for second, third, fourth, fifth chances.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I had the opportunity to be prayed over while I was there at a door. Could you explain to everyone the importance of the door and the spiritual authority that you guys take as spiritual lieutenants of the place that God has called you to work at, for this time, for this season?
Yeah, Sarah, you're referencing, we are a place of a lot of second chance, third chance stories. We have and are continuing to grow our partnerships with some of those avenues. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that were exceptional welders, painters, accountants, whatever the case may be, and maybe have gotten off track, and they're carrying some shame in that. And we just, we're just very transparent about our flaws, and this is who we are. And by the way, why don't you come on board? We'll just be flawed together and just focus our journey with the Lord and see where it takes us, right? So, but, we talked about the darkness in the plant. There was a very significant spiritual shift that happened. I remember it specifically. In fact, some of your folks here at Beltway probably remember I invited a group of ministers and other men from other groups, Men's Academy group, that type of thing, to come into the plant and pray, because you could feel that there was this darkness in it, and had a wonderful walk through the plant, prayed into the plant, and it was amazing on the opposite effect of what you would think, the darkness. It just kind of brought out a lot of brokenness in people. We couldn't do anything right. It was very frustrating. I could feel myself being personally attacked in it, and just started to realize we need to take authority over this.
Yeah.
So we started. There's some of us that anointed the doorways of the plant and prayed into the doorways of the plant, and I still continue. Not every day, but most days I'll walk through and pray into the doorways. And, now I have actually, when you were in the plant, I grabbed one of the guys, actually ex-inmate, very colorful background, found the Lord.
He's a preacher now.
Yeah, he's just all in, right?
Yeah.
And I said, hey, Carlos, why don't you come on over and pray with us? And he jumped right in.
He did.
And no shame, no judgment. We stood at the doorway like we do often, and we take authority. And what we've been doing is, and it's been wonderful, is the door is a filter. It's blessed by our Father. Anyone that passes through that door, anything that is not of our Father, is removed. And it's cast appropriately so. In the name of Jesus, it is cast away. And we pray for the safety and the well-being of the workers, because what we do is dangerous. There's a lot of dangerous work, so pray into their safety. And then the fact that that the men and women feel fed in the work, it gives them a sense of satisfaction. Because when they leave, whatever is not of you, Father, it is left behind. They go home, they're loving on their wives, their children, their husbands, whatever the case may be, and they're just being more of a light. And, quite frankly, they may not even know it's happening.
Yeah.
They may not even know.
Sneaky Jesus.
Yeah, right. I think about that sometimes. Yeah. Some of the people, because you see some folks that there's brokenness, and they just haven't. It's in them. They just don't know what it is.
Right.
And they don't know what the answer is. But I just pray that as they walk through the door, once in the morning, once in the evening, that a little piece of whatever is broken in them, it chips away at that. Mm-hmm. And they find light. Yeah. They find peace. They find truth. They are certainly met with grace. Mm-hmm. And they know. They know that there's something different as a result of that. Wouldn't you agree, Scott?
Yeah. I mean, I think even, talking about that, it's the intentionality of our prayer. Before Erik was coming down here, I was praying for leaders to enter the plant, for the leadership of the plant, and these people to come in, and I'd see Erik coming in, and as I look back, I'm like, those are prayers answered.
Oh, that's good.
And there's even opportunities. There were times while I was down here, and it was very difficult, where I wanted to leave. I was calling my old boss up in Manitowoc, and I was like, I'm out of here. And I talked to my wife, and we're like, let's pray about it. And it was like a clear no, not yet. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Are you sure, Lord?
And and those were those opportunities. If I would have just done what I wanted, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We wouldn't be praying for guys in the middle of the shop floor. We wouldn't be, having opportunities to lead guys to Christ, to have more Christian brothers coming into the plant, and other guys coming to church from the plant. That those are like, Beltway always does the like, we love our city. It's like, that's part of it, just being in the community with these guys, but being prayerful, like when we're just running around, just remembering God and why we do this, and just asking for his blessing in whatever we do. I think that, even if we're not perfect and we're not acting now, it's like our prayers are set, and that's God moving in the plant. We can't do anything. We can't mix, part A, part B together to get this formula. It's just watching God do what he does around us. And that's the cool part, just, all his glory.
Okay, y'all, so good. Am I right? Man, I hope this conversation has got you thinking like it has me. What's the invitation God has for you to join him in what he is doing or wants to do in your workplace? For Erik, it kind of all started at a meeting where he just flat out said, God is good. Could you this week be on the lookout for your God is good moment? Maybe you have a business lunch coming up. Could you pray out loud for your meal instead of quietly in your head? Asking God to not only bless your food, but also the people you are sharing the table with. Remember, it's got to start somewhere. But maybe you're like Scott was, a man alone in the endeavor of being a light in a dark environment. Ask the Lord to maybe highlight people of faith at your workplace, or to even bring more believers or more spiritual lieutenants to where you work. And if there literally is no one, I encourage you, invite men and women of God to come to your place of work and pray. Anoint the doors if you feel led, and take spiritual authority over that environment. Y'all, this conversation is not over. Join us next week as we dive deeper into leading with influence, grace, and respect, working as unto the Lord, glorifying him as we go about our work, spirit-filled, with creativity, craftsmanship, skill, and excellence. Erik and Scott also share some highlight reels of some of the lives that have been transformed because of relationships. So make sure to catch us next time as we wrap up this 4-part series on faith and work. Thanks so much for listening to the Beyond Sundays podcast. We hope y'all have a blessed day. And remember, God is always moving, and he's moving in your life too, and at work, beyond Sundays.